This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our special guest, Pat Thompson. We're doing an unusual intro today in celebration of the Evergreen Review anthology coming out soon, which is just chock full of amazing interviews with Black Panther, Jean Genet, articles on William Burroughs. It's just so fat, I can't even tell you. And it was, of course, the baby of Barney Ross at Grove Press, one of the true defenders against censorship. And this is from an interview with Eldridge Cleaver, who was the Minister of Culture for the Black Panthers. Question: what happened on April 6th, the night of the shootout in which Bobby Hutton was killed? Eldridge says, we're in the process of gathering food for the picnic the next day. We had a fundraising picnic for Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, and Kathleen was running for office. We needed funds for their campaigns and also for the Huey Newton Defense Fund and a few cases in which bail money was needed. So we organized this picnic. We spent a lot of time on it and invested $300 in meat and things like that. We're really uptight about the picnic. We wanted to come off without any problems. We put leaflets in the community, put up posters, had some spots advertising on the radio, so that it was a well-known fact that the thing was coming up. We had a little encounter with the park authority people and tried to get them to refuse to let us have the people. Yeah, they just didn't go along with that. We wanted the place. The pigs didn't persuade the park people to impose some very stringent conditions, like no political speeches to be given in the park, no passing out of leaflets and literature during the picnic, no this, no that. Intentionally petty harassment. We had this car that had been given to us by this white cat. He gave us two cars. A lot of people have given us things, but this particular car had a Florida license. It was a white Ford with a Florida license plate. It was quite easy to spot, and none of the brothers liked to use it for that reason. It had pretty good identification. I had the identification. I had press cards and all that stuff, passes, things of that nature, but most brothers don't have anything beyond a draft card, possibly a driver's license. A lot of brothers have insufficient identification. Well, this car was always being stopped. Pigs would spot the license plate, move in, pull the car over, stop the cat, put him through a lot of changes, ask him if he was from Florida and shit like that, just to be fucking with him. This night, about 9 o'clock, shit went down. We had been going back before using David Henman's pad as the point where we were centralizing all the food and things so that we could take it to the park. His house was closest to the park of the pads we had available. We'd been out dropping people off here and there, shit like that. We were on our way back to this house. I was driving this car I just described to you. There were two other cars behind me belonging to brothers. I have this thing going, I have to take a leak sometime. I mean, this particular night it came down on me and I had to take a piss real badly. I'm only 3 or 4 blocks away from the house, but I guess I just about pulled down this street. My reaction is I got to take a piss. The other cats stopped their cars right behind mine and I got out of the car and I started taking a piss right along the driver's side. Then this car comes around the corner down here. I didn't know it was a cop car when I first saw it. So I said, wow, there's some people coming, man. So I stopped pissing, ran around to the other side of the car and just continued. I was just trying to avoid those lights, a bad scene. He might drive by. But when the car got up there, it stopped right behind my car. I could see all these lights and shit right on top of it. And then I could tell it was a cop car. Threw the spotlight on me, man. Both cops jumped out yelling, come out from behind there. I zipped my pants back up. I guess I took too long to get back there from and out onto the street. Don't know, don't ask. But it really wasn't that long, you dig? When I stepped out from behind my car, man, the motherfucker started shooting. See, I mean, I don't know if they recognized me or if they just knew I was driving or they had it set up and were just waiting for a chance or what. So naturally, what I do is dive for the ground. Somebody had a gun or two. I don't know. But somebody started returning that fire. And by that time, another cop car came around the corner and cops in that car started shooting, shot at all the window shit. And everybody was yelling, let's get out of here. So we scattered, see? Ran across the street. Then they shot one brother, Warren Wells. I thought I was shot. I fell down, tripped over, my feet hit the ground. It was a very frightening situation. That was a weird shoot him out. I can't describe to you. It turned out there were about 50 cops around that area. And they say that all those cops came after we'd gone into this house, but there was so much shooting going on, man. It seemed like there were 50 million cops. Now, I hope I'm not skipping over some of the nice detail, but we had run away and ran right into a cop, and he started shooting at us, ran another way, and another cop started shooting at us. So we fall through this fence thing, which turned out to be a little shed. When I hit the ground, I found myself boxed in between two houses with the shed in back and with the pigs back there. And out in front, man, the street was just full of cops. They were all shooting over there. See, when I hit the ground on the other side, that's when I discovered that Bobby had a rifle, and he started running into these cops and they shot and he split. And that gives him some air. But during that pause, Bobby was nearest his house. He tried the doors and found it was open. See, so we went into the cellar over there. Cops surrounded the pad, man, and just started pouring fire into it. They were shooting it out. I mean, just shooting it out, something terrible. They started throwing in tear gas shells. Bobby was dealing with the door, and there really was no way for them to rush down there because we'd have to come down the little narrow passageway, and they couldn't really get in there now during all this fire, and they were throwing this tear gas in there, and we tried to move some of the furniture shit around so we could get a little protection. See, while I was standing there, man, Chuck Whitey shot a tear gas grenade through the window. It hit me in the chest, saying, "Sock down on my ass." Well, I just thought I'd never see again. It's dark in there. Seeing little Bobby strip me down from blood dig, and that's how my clothes got off. See, I mean, the show went on for almost 90 minutes, according to the papers. In that time, we were fighting on gas, more or less, and getting shot at. Eventually, they set the house on fire. They shot fireballs in there. We couldn't deal with that. We could deal with the gas, but not that. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Pat Thomas. Pat, I have got to thank you for the accomplishment you've just done, which really has benefited my life and the history of my youth as well. Let me just give a little backdrop to who you are. A historian, interviewed 1960s era Evergreen, and whoever doesn't know what Evergreen is, because it was before a lot of people's time, it was one of the most important and controversial anthologies, publications of its time, started by my and your hero, Pat, Barney Ross at Grove Press. And you are now releasing this incredible anthology after your other achievements, such as Material Wealth, The Personal Archives of Allen Ginsberg, Listen, Whitey, The Sights and Sounds of Black Power. And we're going to get into that in a minute, 1965 to 75. Did It, Jerry Rubin, An American Revolutionary. So the Evergreen anthology, I don't know how long you spent compiling. First of all, has like 100 covers of Evergreen.
Yes.
And it has so many articles with so many different people, really long interviews. And I just want to name off a few of what were my favorite. Besides covering Allen Ginsberg, William, and let Barney Ross it for a minute. 60 censorship trials to publish my favorite writers, including Hubert Selby, Henry Miller, Jean Genet, etc., Burroughs. So in this ultra fat, coming soon on Fantagraphics, glorious book, there's a lot on the Black Panthers, which I really enjoyed. Eldridge Cleaver, interviews, really long interviews. Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, Jean Genet in the Black Panthers, John Kerry after Vietnam, really great takedown, which I'm going to read some of that.
Beautiful.
Allen Ginsberg, a piece about him. I mean, it goes Timothy Leary. I can't even name in this fat anthology. One thing that really also in the here and now, Mark Rudd talking about a Columbia University student who was arrested. Hello. It's not only historical, it's so pertinent to now.
Yes.
So, Pat Thomas, I thank you for your love and dedication. I am so excited about this coming. Also, bizarrely enough, stopped by the Chinese printers for censorship.
Right.
Makes sense. Do tell, how the hell did you take on such an adventure? And I thank you dearly for doing it.
Well, this to me is a natural progression. So my first book is called Listen, Whitey, The Sights and Sounds of Black Power, where I hung out with Black Panthers and Black nationalists, and I figured out what music inspired them and how they inspired music.
And when and where was that? Was that in San Francisco?
Oakland. I was living in Oakland. I own a house in Oakland. So I was right there at ground zero. This is in the early 2000s. So I would read about Panthers written by various people, and then I would go hang out with them, right? And over time,
Whoever is not presently incarcerated or murdered.
exactly. So we're
Thank you.
talking David Hilliard, Elaine Brown, Bobby Seale, Erica Huggins. So that was my first book, and that caused a little bit of a sensation because for all the books about the Black Panthers, no one's ever talked about the music that they inspired and inspired them.
Hello, rap music. Hello, jazz. Hello, just about everything. Just about any intellectual person that, and the books that were inspired as well.
That's
So
right.
tell us some of the music that they were name checking.
Well, believe it or not, Huey Newton was obsessed with Dylan. He felt that song, "There's Something Going On, You Don't Know What It Is, Mr. Jones." He thought that there were hidden messages in there, or subversive messages. In fact, the book, the cover of Listen Whitey is Huey Newton holding that album, right? He's holding, that's Highway 61, right? Yeah, that song's on Highway 61. So there's an incredible connection between Dylan and the Panthers that people are not aware of. They later met Dylan, and Dylan, of course, was typical Dylan. He was a little obtuse. He was a little elusive.
Uptight, a little bit of a dick.
A little bit uptight.
Shy, but it came off as arrogant, I guess.
Yeah, the Panthers had their own band called the Lumpen, taken from the lumpen proletariat, right? And they would take songs by Sly Stone or the Temptations and rewrite them with more militant lyrics.
By the way, Papa Was a Rolling Stone is just a ball of confusion. One of my favorite all-time revolutionary songs. Come on.
Yeah. So they would take a song, let's say by the Temps, and rewrite it to make it a little more like, don't mess with us, don't F with us, or we're going to get your ass. There was obviously a lot of jazz. Archie Shepp had an album called Attica Blues. Weirdly, there were people that were not committed. For example, Miles Davis would not make a public statement for the Panthers. They were shocked.
Right?
Well, complicated because he was kind of a made man in his own way.
He had his own set of problems that went beyond his own headspace. So I could kind of understand, him going inward instead of outward, Miles Davis, because
right. But
Miles also grew up rich. So that's a compliment.
That's true. But the most interesting thing that I discovered is that in the late 60s, Motown started a militant side label called Black Forum. And this Black Forum label released an album by Stokely Carmichael. They released an album by Martin Luther King called Why I Oppose the Vietnam War. They released an album by Amiri Baraka. They released an album by Elaine Brown, who was a key Black Panther. And these albums were sort of lost to time. Motown in other words, they're not in any Motown book, right?
Yeah, they need to come back out.
So I did 40 pages just on that stuff alone.
Okay, so
right?
What years were those? What years did that label exist?
Like 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73.
How were you treated when you first tried to become friends with, at that point, Black Panthers Revisited?
Well,
how did they treat you? I mean, are they like, all right, hello, Whitey?
Well, here's the interesting thing. They were less skeptical of me because when a Black scholar approaches the Panthers, they usually have their own academic agenda. Right. And they try to take the Panthers and pigeonhole them into whatever they feel as a Black person the Panthers met. So actually being a honky was a plus because I didn't have a Black axe to grind. Does that make sense?
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting. And I have to say, the interviews with, the Eldridge Cleaver interview is just fantastic, who was the Minister of Culture for the Black Panthers, Soul on Ice, he wrote. I'm going to read a little passage from that later. I'll probably do the readings after we're done talking because we got so much to talk about. Bobby Seale, there's just so much in this new Evergreen review. And John Jeunet with the Black Panthers, I never knew that. And
yeah. Well, so let's
Evergreen does again.
To my next book, because it all kind of funnels into this. So my next book was an oral and visual history of Jerry Rubin, Abby Hoffman, and the Yippies. And the Yippies had a tight relationship with the Panthers. Also, the Yippies are another misunderstood group, right?
Absolutely.
When people think of Jerry Rubin, they think that Jerry Rubin was a sellout because he put on a tie and went to Wall Street. Rubin actually was on Wall Street selling solar panels in 1980 when nobody wanted to know. He was not a Reaganite, right? He was not a Republican. And so I broke down a lot of walls and fallacies with that book. And then the third book.
And that one was called Did It? Jerry Rubin, an American Revolutionary.
Yes. Right. Then my third book, I am obsessed with Allen Ginsberg as a singer, right?
Oh, that style.
I'm obsessed with him as a sinner.
Yeah.
you mean like
and actually there's a really good article in this Evergreen review written by somebody else, by Gunnar what's his name? Gunnar Harding, maybe. Yeah. And he's writing about Allen Ginsberg, and I'm going to read a passage about that, which is really fantastic as well. But please go on. So you became obsessed with Allen Ginsberg as a singer.
Allen released a double album in the early 80s called First Blues. One side was Dylan and Ginsberg, Dylan with David Amram, Dylan with Arthur Russell.
Exactly. But also has been circulating recently is the Ginsberg actually on Letterman singing, right?
What?
He did that too. Too.
All right, let's aside a Letterman aside. I mean, Brother Theodore was on Letterman more than any act, and to me, it was a vocabulary revolutionary. He was a definitely maniac.
Yeah. So through
Allen Ginsberg on Letterman.
So through the years, when I would approach Ginsberg, he was flattered that I wanted to talk to him as a vocalist, not as a poet, right? And so after he died, I started a series of Ginsberg CD reissues, putting this stuff out on CD for the first time.
When was that?
This is like early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah. So Ginsberg's archive is at Stanford University. And there's probably 150,000 items, right? Letters, tapes, as dirty gym socks.
I was going to say filthy underwear has to be there if you wore any.
So I began to realize that the only Ginsberg book that has never been done is his own archive, basically his ephemera. So this is a giant coffee table book with all kinds of interesting stuff. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples you're going to love. One is the American Nazi Party, George Lincoln Rockwell, early 70s, wants to assassinate Ginsberg for being a gay commie Jew, right?
What a crime. What a crime. And in those days, all of them were crimes. And to this day, hello.
Yes. Ginsberg writes to the American Nazi Party, says, I know you want to assassinate me. Can we get together and have a meeting? Okay. Here's another one. Ginsberg gets Henry Kissinger on the phone, circa 71, records the call. He suggests that Ginsberg suggests that he and Kissinger go on national TV naked to debate the Vietnam War, and he actually gets Kissinger to laugh. Right?
That's pretty monumental in itself.
It is. So that book is packed with that type of stuff. It has Ginsberg's notes listening to Dylan's Blood on the Tracks for the first time. It has a wonderful rewrite of Howl by Terry Southern called Towel. It's just a Mad Magazine-like parody of Howl.
Now, has this book come out, or are you still working?
No, this book came out a year ago. It's called Material Wealth.
Okay.
The Personal Archives of Allen Ginsberg.
The Personal Archives of Allen Ginsberg. Right. That came out. Who put that out?
Powerhouse Books out of Brooklyn.
Okay. And the new book is out on Fantagraphics.
That's my usual publisher. They did the Rubin book and they did the Black Panther book.
Well, and also with the new Evergreen Review anthology, it has all of the covers, which were quite controversial and sexy.
Yes.
Outlandish. Because let's just go back there's something here I want to get to here for a minute. I love what the John Waters quote. I'm going to have to just take you out of here for 1 second because I want to get to this John Waters quote here. And who also talks about, actually, I'm going to do these readings when we're done because we got too much to talk about and I have to go scrambling back and forth. But the interesting thing is, so many people were affected and infected, whether they know it or not, by the one man who I know you claim in your intro to this book is probably your and my favorite American, which is Barney Rossett,
Mm-hmm.
ran Grove Press, who took over Evergreen Review, whose whole concept was that if somebody writes it and it's left of everything, it's got to be printed because somebody's going to want to read it. And with 60 censorship trials, and again, he published, for those not in the know, Henry Miller, my favorite author of that time, Hubert Selby, Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs, the list goes on. It's so immense what he did. And in the Evergreen Review, there were so many people that were just, not accepted in any other publications. What's interesting about this anthology, that I don't know how long it took you to put together, is there are interviews that are so in-depth.
Mm-hmm.
And even the John Kerry one really interested me for this. I mean, he just had got back from Vietnam War and he's breaking down the horror of it. The other thing that John Kerry did, whatever he did later than this, he was the only one that stood up when the Iran-Contra scandal was going down and said, this is real. And by the way, really good Netflix 4-part series now called American Conspiracy, The Octopus. Sideline, just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Really fucking good to look at.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all right. So you as a historian and to some degree a hysterian like myself, Barney Rossett, who at 20 published one of my poetry books. He was my hero. I don't even know if you knew it. We also had his daughter on the podcast. Did so much for the revolutionized people's writers and releases of books in this country. I mean, nobody compares to him.
No, not even close. Not even close.
Stubborn, idealistic in the right way, just mandatory. I mean, 60 censorship trials and winning.
He's ground zero for the rock and roll scene you came out of. Patti Smith, Tom Verlaine, Richard Hell, Jim Carroll, yourself, right?
Absolutely.
All of you were reading this stuff.
And again, literature was more important to me than music when I was 12 and 13, and that was Barney Rossett. So it all comes back to that. I have to say I'm getting goosebumps just talking to you because I think this new anthology just shows so much of what American revolutionary literature once was, that inspired so many people and that needs to be gotten back to. I've never stopped clutching that torch because it's, and there are some of us still out there, but it's so important. It's so well put together. What was the difficulty? Because you also do there's a lot of research that you've done. Well, how long did this take you? This is a monster piece.
It took me about 4 or 5 years. First of all, I had to get a hold of every individual. I have every copy of Evergreen. I'm the only person I know who owns every issue. I've never met anyone. People say I've got 50.
Well, how did that happen? Just because you were collecting it at the time, or you're just an obsessive researcher?
I'm an obsessive nerd. It's like the guys who have every BYG jazz album or every ESP jazz album.
Oh yeah,
right.
So I got every issue. Completist. Then I started to try to track down the original. Most of the people who worked for Evergreen are dead or near dead. Right, the original staffers. So I started to get interviews. This amazing woman, Claudia Menza, a guy named Nat Sobel. One of the best things that I got, almost all the front covers were designed or thought of by a guy named Fred Jordan. Unfortunately, by the time I reached Fred, he was too old to talk, but his son Ken was an expert, who had sort of shadows his dad as a youngster.
Because a lot of the covers were really sexy. I mean, they were enticing. A lot of like sexy chicks, sexy guys, sometimes homosexual images. I mean, it was it looked almost like pornographic literature, which was considered at the time anyway.
Right.
Because it was so fucking real.
Well, the thing that I realized what Barney was is he was a great a great ideas man, and like most smart guys, surrounded himself with equally talented people. So Barney could drink all day, come up with great ideas, and then get 3 or 4 other guys to implement. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Barney when I say that at
Hell
all.
no, he knew what he wanted and he knew how to get it and he knew who had to do it for him. That's what a publisher does.
And the other thing he did is he was personally invested in his right. Him and Samuel Beckett were extremely close, right?
Oh.
Nowadays you get signed a publishing deal, you're probably not even going to meet the president of the company, right? You're not even going to get invited to his Christmas party. Barney was integrally tied on a personal, emotional level to almost all of his writers. That's part of Barney's secret. We've in today's sort of internet society, we've eliminated personalities, we've eliminated emotional relationships. I mean, has anything ever really come out positive out of a text? No. It's about meeting in person. It's
Doubtful.
about
Exactly. Well, look, I'm sure that's how I got my, first poetry book published was meeting him in person, which to me was just, I must have been 20, he must have been 80. I was so happy and enthralled that he'd even bother with me. And I have to say, it was just one of the most wonderful moments in my life, just meeting my hero even above the people that he published, because he fought the fucking good fight.
What he had, what's missing today from most of the American, he had intellectual and cultural curiosity. That's why I call my essay the golden age of reading and thinking.
Right? Exactly.
It's
exactly.
Yes, cultural, and he didn't necessarily even personally love everything that he published, but he believed in the right for it to be published, right?
Now I'm gonna read what John Waters said in the introduction to this. He said, "We're still benefiting from the freedoms that we have because of what Barney Ross did and because of the battles he fought. They didn't have a press agent, but they had censorship courtroom battles, which is the same thing." And this is what Barney Ross had said, which is why I will love him forever. "I feel personally that a word has never been written or uttered that shouldn't be published. For me, the idea of publishing and anti-censorship go naturally together. We were going after writers who had basically failed a commercial sense, because if they had success, other publishers would have gotten involved already. We were looking for new talents, new people who really had something to offer. We were very aware of the dangers and the possibilities of people like Ginsberg, Beckett, Kerouac, Rovrier, Ionesco, Genet. They represented something that was going to be very important in the next generation, and may I add, the next generations. From the beginning, starting with the San Francisco poets and going through the horrors of the '68 convention in Chicago and onwards." Now, this... Again, I'm getting goosebumps because this anthology is just riddled with brilliance on that level. And it's so mandatory for people that were there at the time, weren't there at the time, and that are hungry for something more, something deeper, something radical, something controversial that still speaks to the fucking soul of, first of all, the true American identity of radicals, both literary and political.
Yep.
And I don't know what else to say beyond that, because this is, to me, I have to say, I'm just so happy this exists, and thank you very much. And it'll be out soon. And the thing is, I find it amazing that it was reprinted where most things are in China, then got held up because of censorship. The very thing itself that was against censorship gets held up, but it is now slated for release in May.
So this is what's happening. We lost a month or two, at the printer with this thing. So we moved the book over to India, okay? Where the Indians, if that's the best phrase to use, did not have a problem with the censorship. So I had already booked this book tour. So I am, at my own expense, flying 300 or 400 books over, carrying them around for this book tour in May. The rest of the world will get this book in July, but I'm doing events. if you don't mind if I rattle these off quickly.
I would love to hear the events, and I'm sorry I'm going to be gone to Europe for most of May. Otherwise, trust me, I'd be on your tail reading from it, as I will be reading from it anyway in this podcast. So I am here to pimp who was once my pimp, which is Barney Rossett, who has pimped all of the most important writers in America.
So real quickly, if you want to get this book 2 months before the rest of the world,
people want to need to order now. It might sell out.
So I will be at Book Soup in LA on May 9th. I will be at the legendary City Lights in San Francisco on May 13th. I will be in Seattle at Elliott Bay Books on the 16th. And then I'm bringing a really cool thing to New York, a place called P&T Knitwear. It's a bookstore. I will have Stephen Heller with me. Stephen Heller used to design Screw.
Oh, yeah.
Village Other.
What date is the New York?
That is Wednesday, May 21st.
I'll write that down.
Yeah, well, we're going to post. We'll post these dates.
Thank you.
Send an email with the dates. We'll post them.
Yeah. I will be in Boston on May 24th at a place called Tre Gatos. And then I'm bringing it to London on Tuesday, June 3rd at a bookstore called Burley Fisher.
I will definitely send some of my London friends and writers there. Now,
the New York ones you said is May 21st, you said, right?
May 21st is New York City at a place called P&T Knitwear with legendary Stephen Heller, a graphic designer.
Now, a few things, thank you to Barney Rossett, are that I met and toured with Hubert Selby. I invited Hubert Selby on tour. He was, I think, doing accounting for a university. I knocked on his door. I was bold. Do you know how important you were to my generation? No. Well, I'm going to tell you. I produced an album with Hubert Selby on it. And also Tim Dahl and I have a thing called Murderous Again. And just last week, I read my favorite passage from Tropic of Capricorn by Henry Miller. And with his band Grid, I have a record. I'm going to send it to you. It is absolutely my favorite piece of literature, most romantic and dark ever written. And we just performed it a week ago. And we have never performed it live, but we had recorded it. And to me, just all of this material, and then especially with the Black Panthers. Now, I have no intimate experience with the Black Panthers, although the race riots of the 60s, which are right in front of my house, meant a lot to me and gave me my spirit of absolute revolution. And so much is covered in this book, 4 or 5 years.
You and I have something in common that you won't know until I say it.
Do tell.
Like yourself, I grew up in the cultural devoid cities of Buffalo and Rochester, New York.
Well, hello. And by the way, I don't even know how I got these books in Rochester. My parents never read a fucking book in their life.
Right. So growing up in Western New York, we were starving for this kind of stuff.
This is before the internet. This is what we had was the midnight special and Saturday rock concert.
And I got started. Luckily I had a brother 9 years older. And in 1973, he brought home a copy of a book called Steal This Book by Abby Hoffman.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Now you're on your way.
I was never the same, people. I was never the same.
I think, but I'm not sure. Occasionally, my father would bring me to this magazine stand so I could get rock scene, Cream magazine. Maybe there I found a used copy. And just because of the cover of Last Exit to Brooklyn.
Downtown Rochester was a giant newsstand. I bet it was that one, right?
Pardon me?
There was a giant newsstand in downtown Rochester.
I could have been that. I could have just found a used copy, and from the cover I picked it up, and then I was on the path. Yeah. And then at that point, it's like, I know what my journey is. Like, I have to fill in, and I have to take the next step of the vacancy left with, although I consider myself a pretty masculine writer, the feminine divide that was left an open hole between Miller and Selby. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes. Speaking of feminism, did you notice the Germaine Greer interview?
Absolutely. Also the Germaine Greer. I mean, there's so many articles in this. How many pages is this book? Nearly 400? Wait.
Something like that. And
it's immense.
The other interesting interview is Bernadette Devlin.
An Irish, like 22-year-old member of parliament?
Exactly.
Came to America, 22? We need more 22-year-old women in Congress.
It's like the Irish version of Bernadine Dorn of the Weather Underground. Interesting, they have the same name, right? The same first name, So there's some pretty interesting women in here. Judith Malina from the Living Theater. And then this is wacky.
And let's face it, at that time, other than Diane DePrima and Waldman, who I'm going in June again to the Naropa, Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poets, and Waldman, Diane DePrima, there weren't really that many women on the scene. Then what's interesting is I just got a book, not the same scene, but parallel times. Bibi Hansen, youngest world superstar, has just released her Factory Poems book, which is full of photos and poems to everybody she knew in the factory. And I hooked up with her when I was doing a Unhappy Hour in LA series, and Ron Athey suggested her to me. And since then, we've done so many shows together. That's a different but parallel scene, because she was hanging out with Jan Kerouac a lot,
right?
And Edie Sedgwick and all that. And she was like 10 at the time.
Yes.
10.
Yes.
So and I just got this in the mail like 3 days ago. I mean, like a week after I got the PDF of your Evergreen review. So, and I mean, I'm a little younger, not much. These things matter to me. This is what was important. It is what set the path, as well as the situation in America. And again, between the Vietnam War, the Kennedy's assassination, Taxi Driver, Summer of Sam, I'm telling you that period right there. That the race riots, just the protest, Ohio. And by the way, one of the great songs of that period was Machine Gun and Ohio.
Yep, by the Isley Brothers Connection.
So amazing and fantastic. And also the Isley Brothers, Time Has Come Today.
Yes, right.
These were, again, such radical songs of that period. So important. Hold up. I mean, I play both those songs on constant replay all the time. And, then it brings us up also to the last poets who Tim and I have worked with, Umar bin Hassan, because again, so important, that period of radical, intelligent Black voices, which for a while progressed into rap and then disintegrated into idiocy.
That's right.
Sad so.
Yes, right. That's exactly right. Yep.
Sad so.
Yes.
We know what it was.
I'm skimming through my table of contents. Like, I love the fact I've got prison poems from Ho Chi Minh, right?
Also freaking amazing. Ho Chi Minh published in there. I mean, just ridiculous.
Yeah, the Naked Lunch censorship trial in Boston.
I mean, the interview with William Burroughs is just so over the top, outrageous, goes everywhere. Really an insight into a psychedelic mindset and a conspiracy theorist breakdowner, in a sense.
And here's one for you Patty Hearst fans, the story of the original Tanya, Shay's Woman in Bolivia.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Tim, jump in, because I'm scrolling for my next passage.
No, because it's like, where is the rebellion now? And John Waters does talk about that.
My mouth.
It's anonymous. It's people shutting down banks and stuff in their bedroom because the progressive youth is into things like cancel culture, and you can't say that. Of course, the right wing is fucking completely nuts. So so it's like, where is the rebellion? Where are the warriors for?
It's right here on the Lydian Spin. We promote every fucking version of rebellion, whether it's musical, literary, or film. Here's where it's at. I'm sorry to say. I wish there is some places out there, and there are even some politicians and newscasts out there, but it is harder to find now that it was easy to find when the Evergreen Review is doing this. Come on.
I guess what I'm getting at is it was a little. You knew where people were gonna. You knew where it was going to come from. The people that are going to try to shut you down. Usually, it was kind of like right wing Christian. I don't know what. Obscenity laws, just all that kind of shit. But now it's like neo-Puritanism. It's coming from all angles. Like, you can't do this.
Well, and again, it's like between the pop porn, absolute vulgarity, and the new Puritanism. I mean, where the divide is so wide. Where does anybody at this point have a place to stand?
I have this phrase I use a lot. The far left is now doing a full reach around to the right.
There you go.
I don't know if you heard it, but I did. I watched as many hours as I could of the 24-hour and almost 25-hour long Cory Booker.
Yes.
speech yesterday, which was so refreshing, invigorating, and right and honest. And I have to say, he had a great thing. He goes, it's neither right or left, it's either right or wrong. And we know how many wrongs were not only done forever. Hello, Evergreen Review pointed some of that out with their political controversial articles, but that are still being carried on in the name of kleptocratic, dictatorial cunts. And this is why this book is very important, as is this.
Yeah, but I think what Tim was getting at, it's not just the right-wing conservatives, the Christian right. We've got a left wing that wants, ideally, they would take my book and anything that might be slightly offensive to anyone on the planet, they would want to take out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
To me, a book that pleases everyone pleases no one.
Well, and again, that's why so many of the books that Barney Ross had printed were very popular in France, which understands sex, death, revolution. And so many of these writers were first published there. I mean, it's why Henry Miller ran away to France in the late 30s or 40s. That's because other than selling pornography for $1 a page, which must have been a good paycheck in those days, he understood. And that's why
back in France too.
That's why everyone we know plays more in Europe than we do in America, because there is an understanding. I hope this book comes out in Europe.
France, right?
Pardon me?
James Baldwin had to move to France,
So many musicians.
My brother might have to move to France because I don't know if the reverse brain drains happen right now. They're buying up all of our scientists.
And Tim's brother is an Ebola scientist.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what we're dealing with right now. And this is what's incredible with anybody who has an understanding of what the 60s attempted and did for a while accomplish, which was, I feel, negated by the nihilism of the 70s when we realized what was achieved? Not much. Why? We don't know. Now, morally, philosophically, personally, on some level, of course, it opened some people's mind and gave them a voice. But for the most part, where are we now? We're back to the 1950s.
Totally in the 1950s.
This is what's terrifying.
Kids got home from Germany and Japan, and they're worried about. Yeah, I mean, it's
but at least the 50s was not neoliberalism, it was liberalism, and it wasn't neo-fascism.
I want to read a passage from this fantastic, humongous anthology of American intellectual revolutionaries from the 60s to the 70s, maybe late 50s. And this is from an article on Ginsburg. I'm just going to quote. And Ginsburg woke up in the madhouse and saw the fear-stricken staring eyes around him and realized that they were all sane and that they had all understood and that they stared at him with his mother's suffering eyes. And he heard the clanging of night's telephones and endless corridors, the roar of the silence from the electric shocks and the boom of the Atlantic outside the last window, thousands of cockroaches, Mussolini, the poisoned tomatoes on the immigrant dockside, her last letter and the huge illuminated key which he took, which would open the blue gates in the sky over the hospital roof. And he stood on the roof with shaking legs as the tiles came loose and fell down into the yard below, and all the windows filled with faces. And he put the key in the lock and turned it, and the sky opened, and he saw in all the faces in the windows, saw the light from the sky, how all the flags were waving in transcendence, and Blake's booming voice was heard again, quote, where the youth pined away with desire and the pale virgins shrouded in snow arise from their graves and aspire where my sunflower wishes to go. And he saw himself standing on a hill long after his death, looking back over his life. And when they found him again, he was hanging onto the gutter, and they drove up in a fire truck and carried him down on the ladder. And the doctors were waiting below in fluttering white coats with shiny round mirrors on their foreheads. And in their pale blue veined fingers, they were holding syringes.
Wow.
It sounds really good when I read it, doesn't it? Because
I love the way you're reading it. I love the way you're reading it.
I can't help it if I am the best spoken word artist, even when interpreting other people's material, because it means something to me. It means everything to me. Words mean everything to me, and with or without music. And that's why this book is so absolutely important. I might put a few other a cappella versions of some stuff from this in after we finish this because help myself.
I'm kind of getting emotional. I love the fact that you love it.
Oh,
I have to say, I was getting emotional when I read this book, Pat. I was. Yeah. Because it matters so much to me, and that's why I'm like, look, I'm the one who's chronically ever since Reagan complaining about the fucking war in any way that I can because the war is never over. Hello, I have to find new ways to say it. I have to find new methods. But the thing is, and I do question myself, why the fuck is it my job? And I don't know when it was put upon me, but it is my fucking job to carry on and complain about the chronic injustices to not only the fucking the whole world, but to individuals as it gets tighter and tighter as it ever does in an ever increasing and subsiding fucking kleptocratic dictatorial prison sentence. And for that, I thank you for releasing this.
Well, I think the reason I'm getting emotional, I've got 2 different publicists plus myself, and we've probably between the 3 of us emailed 1,000 journalists who, I figured maybe 10% or 5% would say, "Oh my God, this looks amazing." The lack of response that I have gotten from the book thus far.
The lack of response equals the amount of ignorance we're facing.
Yeah, I mean,
I jumped on this. I jumped on, and thank you, Josh Mills, because he's sent a lot of people to the Lydian spin. And look, this is, again, without Bernie Rossett, I might not exist and might neither of this exist. And the reason we do this podcast is to give voice to everyone who is still radical, revolutionary, stubborn, insistent, and doesn't give a shit what the mainstream thinks about them. And trust me, when I told a few people I was doing this today, they were like, "Oh my God, I can't wait to hear this." I'm like, yeah, well, I bet you can't wait for the book either. Because it matters.
As I was finishing the book, I rewatched the documentary about the making of Apocalypse Now, right?
Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, Heart of Darkness.
So amazing.
So the last sentence in my introduction is comparing Barney to Coppola in the jungles of the Philippines trying to finish Apocalypse Now, right?
And not to mention, there is an interview with Dennis Hopper in this Evergreen review compilation. Yes. But again, once again, the main thing that's so amazing, besides the variety of radicals in here, is that so many of the interviews are really long. And that's because it gives you a really good insight into what's going on at that time, which is really paralleling this time in a very, and when I'm going to read some of the John Kerry letter, because I have to say, he just got back from Vietnam and he is saying the horrors of this. And it parallels what they're doing to veterans now by cutting everyone's security networks, minor as they are.
And the other thing with these long interviews, we live in this horrible soundbite society.
140 characters, hello.
140 characters.
30 seconds, hello.
Or even a music magazine that says, well, you can review this new album with only 100 words, right? I love the era when you could do these long interviews. If an album really moved you, you could have 1,000 words, right?
Well, people don't listen to things more than once. And if they listen to get through it at all.
Right.
And that's like, and so you can't, I don't give a shit with music. You got to hear it more than once to really, I mean, with the exception of some total shit,
and then this goes back to another radical who died young, but was, I think, kind of an extension of what the Evergreen Review was, which was Lester Bangs, the most gonzo. I mean, most gonzo. And I have to thank the dead man himself because he tried to mention me. I don't know why he had such a fixation on me and Teenage Jesus. In articles he wrote about almost everybody. And I have to say, because he knew something was a shit stirrer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Could either of you guys, actually, speaking of Screw Magazine, could you get that up in Buffalo or Rochester?
Oh, yes.
Screw? I thought, okay, so it wasn't just circulated in New York City. You could actually...
Well, the one thing I didn't like about Screw Magazine, it was, I don't care about the vulgarity, the sexuality.
It was funny. Come on.
I care that it was ugly.
Unlike Hustler. He wanted it to be. He wanted it to be.
Well, he was ugly. But other than, I have to say, with pornography, I respect Hustler, only man I've ever voted for, Larry Flint, because he paid people to report, especially on Republican sex scandals.
Yes.
He had a sense of humor. It wasn't just about, and the most dividing and divisive cover of all was a woman in a meat grinder, which I thought had so many different meanings and was so absolutely stellar of the time. Like, oh yeah, do we really treat women like this? Or do you treat women like this?
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
also some of the interviews in the Evergreen Review, which are talking about the way that I forget which interview it was that I read that said at that period, and we were talking about the sexual revolution, that men had to change their concept. And now we're back to a place where we thought men, and especially young men, have changed their concept. But then we got these middle-aged and older octogenarians who are so misogynistic, but not only misogynistic, misanthropic, and are so vulgar in not only their domestic violence and their rapey behavior, but then they're just takedown or just hiring pretty blondes who are as dumb as a fucking doorknob to be their mouthpieces. So anyway, I'll go back to Cory Booker for almost 25 hours, giving one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard of my life, thinking there is hope. And it will come from Newark, where a lot of radicals came from. Oh, wasn't Leroy Jones from Newark?
He's in the magazine. Yeah, Newark, New Jersey.
He withstood the riots.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. We got to get back to the base. And the thing is, we are more alike in what you have compiled from the late 60s, 70s, than we are unalike. That is for people like us.
That's right.
Who need these voices, who will not be silenced.
Yep, that's right.
Who respect history and cannot understand what history is now becoming because it is so vulgar and stupid and unhistorical in their comprehension of what has already gone down. And the John Kerry piece, I can't wait to read. That's going to be my closing piece on this.
Fantastic. That's fantastic.
And not that I'm even a fan of John Kerry, but I'm a fan of him for that article, and I'm a fan of him for standing up because Iran-Contra was real. Can you imagine? All these Republicans kissing fucking ass, Putin's dick being sucked nonstop. They won't stand up for what they know is right. And here we have to go back to the people that knew what was wrong.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, to even imagine that there could be black radicals like that because so many were incarcerated or shot down, as there were.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of them progressed into rap music. We're talking the Public Enemy, Wu-Tang Clan. Paris came out of Oakland, who had to be shut down. Paris was very important rapper.
Speaking of black radicals, Pat, how much have you gotten into in terms of research of Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad and Farrakhan and that whole world?
I'm not a big fan of that crew.
I'm not saying you have to be a fan.
No.
I'm just saying like
I'm not a big fan of them because I know the hypocrisy, which is why Malcolm X separated himself from the Nation of Islam.
Yeah.
And one of Muhammad Ali's biggest regrets before he died was that he had thrown Malcolm X under the bus because Muhammad Ali thought that Elijah Muhammad was pure. And later on, Muhammad Ali realized he was not pure. He was
all right. Well, beliefs or non-beliefs, theory or not, I have to say Farrakhan is one of the greatest speakers, disregard the message or not. And I have to give Ari Melber props for having a newscast one night which compared a Jay-Z lyric to Farrakhan and broke it down. Please investigate. It's hilarious. Yeah. Ari Melber, one of the only newscaster who's ever quotes rappers and knows his shit because he is a lawyer of the highest degree. I have to say, Farrakhan was a great poet, but so is Charles Manson. Do I abide by anything they both do? Not really.
But I would also say that the Nation of Islam inspired some great art and some great jazz.
Bow ties.
Bow ties, but
well-dressed men.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to completely negate the whole thing, but one of the things that my Listen Whitey book does is talks about some of the amazing art. Leroy Jones switching over to Mary Baraka, his poetry got better.
Yeah.
Right? His poetry got better. As a pissed off black nationalist, he was fucking rocking it, And
now, I hate to say it, but the system and the situation being what it is, a lot of people are getting scared. I just read something that Neil Young is afraid he might not get back into the country as a Canadian because of what he said about fucking Trump. Give me a fucking break. You know what? I mean, this is just getting ridiculous. As I like to say about Trump, quote him and do it. Lock him up, build a wall. I'll then say, set the whole fucking thing on fire because they're trying to destroy us piece by piece.
Yeah.
Cory Booker, all hands, hands in the air.
What Trump supporters don't realize is the whole build the wall is actually a prison to themselves. You're making a prison. We're isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. We're building a wall. We're basically putting ourselves in prison.
And by the way, it was under Clinton, who pretended to be a good guy, that I started doing a lot of talk about prisons. And the most recent speech I just did with Tim Dahl was about the statistics of the industrial prison complex. By the way, American Conspiracy, The Octopus touches on Wackenhut, Australian industrial prison complex. And if they would actually curtail the $26 million that Trump has spent on golfing and just since January, curtail the amount of money they're giving to that virgin autist, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
There's the budget. And by the way, you know what, Elon? Why don't you just pay everybody $1 million, not just people that vote for you when you lost the fucking election, by the way, in Wisconsin? There'd be all of it. They're all corrupt. All right. Has there ever been a more corrupt time in American politics, a dumber time? Now, there's been corrupt times, but has there ever been a dumber time with this faux masculine toxicity, anti-everything that is not them, anti-everything that is not as rich as them? And by the way, fail, Elon, you autistic virgin. By the way, hang on. You realize that an article just came out about his failed penile implant, which is why all his children are in vitro. Plays. He doesn't even support his own children. No wonder he takes away school lunches.
No, you're right. This current guys like Halderman and Ehrlichman were 1,000 times smarter.
Even if they were evil.
They were evil, but they were smarter.
But it's everything. But everything's worse. Yeah. So real journalism doesn't really exist anymore. It's all opinion pieces. New York Times gives more attention to Marjorie Taylor Greene or these idiots that are kind of made them celebrities and give no
don't
time.
Cover that.
They give no coverage of actual grassroots protests that are happening. They give basically nothing to them. They'll talk about Marjorie Taylor.
Well, by the way, April 5th. By the way, the day this is going out or the day after is going to be a big protest against the dumbest politician who's bankrupted 6 of his own companies, including a casino, and is now about to bankrupt America with his fraudulent fucking ideas. Anyway, I don't believe in the vote. I don't believe in the Electoral College. April 5th is a big day of protest. See what happens. Because does it matter? There were almost 1 million people protesting in Turkey last week. Come on.
So Pat, I understand the frustration. You're working with a publicist. You're going out there trying to get all this stuff. But guess what? You are still doing it. You listed all those dates, and you're going out there, and you just got to do it yourself. I mean,
well, he's doing it through Fantagraphics, which is still independent.
I know Lucas Ligeti, his father, the famous composer, and when the Russians came into Hungary, this is a heavyweight 20th century composer. He writes to all the conservatories all around the world saying, "Listen, I can teach counterpoint theory." No one responds to this guy. He wrote like 1,000 letters. No one, except for Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, who said, "Well, you can come in, you can come to Cologne, and you got to leave your country, and I'll hook you up." But it wasn't even a professor. It was another composer who was hooked up. So don't be down about that stuff. I mean, you're doing the work. And it's being recognized, and you're going out there, and you're gonna show it.
We do the work because it has to be done, and it doesn't matter when it happened. Protests have been going on forever, and they need to continue to go on. And in some houses, they do, because here we are going on. What can I say? We're still going.
Exactly. Yep.
So you're going on tour for this book, which is fantastic. And now is it being published also in Europe? Because I'm sure they would love it in the UK.
Fantagraphics has a wonderful European distributor called Turnaround. And this book will be available throughout the UK and throughout continental Europe.
Which is so important because, again, I mean, for some reason, the Europeans, especially the French, have always embraced these authors, this writing, these intellects. and where a lot of them either had to go or, I mean, Genet Miller had to go there, just had to go. Let's face it, had to go, had to go.
Yeah, this book should be very popular at Shakespeare and Company, which is
exactly.
Paris.
Well, when it's out, I might propose doing my own special reading at the University of Chicago, Paris, which often promotes a lot of my gigs, and it will be advertised on my Facebook page, which is promoted by Sebastian Greco of the University of Chicago, Paris. Now, I'm just scrolling to a bit of this John Kerry thing, which I want to read a little bit of.
Please.
So this was John Kerry had just come out of the Vietnam War, and whatever he became in marrying the Heinz billionaire wife is whatever it was, but this article is very important. So he's talking about how the men who came back, just like now, veterans are treated so. The most amount of homeless people for a while were veterans in the state of Texas after they've risked their whole life. So I'm going to quote John Kerry on this. He goes, "We call this investigation," this is an article he wrote, this is published in the new anthology, the Evergreen Review by Pat Thomas. So we call this investigation the Winter Soldier investigation. The term Winter Soldier is a play on words of Thomas Paine's 1776 when he spoke of the sunshine patriot and summertime soldiers who deserted at Valley Forge because the going was rough. We who have come here to Washington have come because we feel we have to be winter soldiers. Now, we could come back to this country. We could be quiet. We could hold our silence. We could not tell what went on in Vietnam. And by the way, sideline, it wasn't until the Vietnam War. So many men that went to war never spoke about it. And it was only after the Vietnam War that we started hearing exactly what was going on. We could come back to this country. We could be quiet. We could hold our silence. We could not tell what went on in Vietnam. But we feel because of what threatens this country, the fact that the crimes threaten it, if not Reds and not Redcoats, but the crimes which we were committed and committing threaten it, that we have to speak out. I would like to talk to you a little bit about the result of the feelings these men carry with them after coming back from Vietnam. The country doesn't know it yet, but it has created a monster in the form of millions of men who have been taught to deal and to trade in violence and who are given the chance to die for the biggest nothing in history. Men who have returned with a sense of anger and a sense of betrayal, which no one has yet grasped. As a veteran and one who feels this anger, I would like to talk about it. We are angry because we feel we've been used in the worst fashion by the administration in this country. In 1970 at West Point, Vice President Agnew said, quote, "Some glamorize the criminal misfits of society while our best men die in Asian rice paddies to preserve the freedom which most of those misfits abuse," unquote. And this was used as a rallying point for our effort in Vietnam. But for us boys in Asia, whom the country was supposed to support, this statement is a terrible distortion from which we can only draw a very deep sense of revulsion, and hence the anger some of the men who are here in Washington today feel. It is a distortion because we in no way consider ourselves the best men of this country, because those he calls misfits were standing up for us in a way that nobody else in the country dared to, because so many who have died would have returned to this country to join the misfits in their efforts to ask for an immediate withdrawal from South Vietnam, because so many of those best men have returned as quadriplegics and amputees, and they lie forgotten in Veterans Administration hospitals in this country, which fly the flag so many have chosen as their own personal symbol. And we cannot consider ourselves America's best men when we are ashamed of and hated what we were called to do in Southeast Asia. Thank you, John Kerry. And thank you, Evergreen Review and Pat Thomas, for publishing that. Wow. Because that is where we are now.
That's right. That's right.
Gaza, Ukraine, 95 countries in conflict right now. We only speak about Ukraine and Gaza because they're immediate and in the press. Nobody's talking about the other. And this is what bothers me about this. Of course, it's horrible what's going on there, and Israel still plowing through Gaza and Ukraine being bombed by Russia. But what about the other 95 countries involved in conflict? Because the war is never over, because that is the American state of mind. Us against them. This is where we are now. And that is not where we are on the Lydian Spin. So I'm going to thank you, my friend, and promote this, your anthology, which is out soon, the Evergreen Review, covering the most important minds of the 60s and 70s, here on the Lydian Spin with Tim Dahl, Lydia Lunch, and Pat Thomas. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Pat, thanks so much.
It really matters.
Thanks.
We're not going away. Some of us are still here, ranting forever. Confront the cockocracy, motherfuckers.